Okay, right, we are live again. Now, let's have a look if this one is working. This one does not seem to be working either. And I'm not sure why. Hey, Cami, thanks for joining. I'm just not sure why YouTube is not picking this up as a vertical stream. I think hey YSR. So Cami is saying that it's vertical for them. So hey Syndicate. So it's vertical in terms of the how it's presented on the screen, but there's this new thing on YouTube called vertical live streams where your live will appear in the shorts feed, but as a live stream. So the normal lives that I do, they are put out to, subscribers or, people who maybe like look at anti-natalist content and it gets recommended or something like that. But this new feature where they can, where it's shown in like what's called vertical live. So it's essentially like, with reels or shorts, you can just scroll through them like that and they're random. It's like that, but with live streams, right? So a random stranger could be flicking through and come across this live stream. So it's a way of a live stream getting more reach, but also like strangers finding it. So the reason that's interesting for this is because it'll mean that people who have never heard of anti-natalism, they're not searching for it, they haven't watched content related to it, it'll get recommended to them, if you get what I mean. Whereas my normal streams, someone would already have to be watching my videos or be watching related content to get my stream recommended to them. So that's why I wanted to try this out, because I thought it would be cool to be to get strangers to interact. And also the vertical lives are much more interactive as well, or they're designed to be much more interactive. So it's frustrating that it's not working. Oh, okay. So it looks like it is being recommended. The Gaming Den just said that they found me while scrolling. Okay, cool. Well, it does work. Okay, Syndicate is confirmed as well. Okay, well, if it works, then thank you for joining, and let's kick things off then. If it is working, so in this live stream, what I wanted to do is, because I know that this will get recommended to people who don't usually come into contact with anti-natalism, they haven't really searched for it, that sort of stuff. I thought this could be like a bit of a Q&A. So yesterday, as some of you will know, I don't think I'm quite center. Yesterday, as some of you will know, it was International Anti-natalism Day, and I'm a bit late to it. Like, obviously, I should have done this stream yesterday. That's my bad, but I couldn't do it yesterday, so I thought I'd at least do a sort of late one today. So so I wanted to do this for International Anti-natalism Day, and do a Q&A for people who are just coming across the idea for the first time, or anyone who is aware of the concept or is an anti-natalist themselves and they just want to ask me any questions that they have as well, like my opinion on something related to anti-natalism, or if they've had something bowling around their head for a bit that they want to test out, like chucking it my way and we can have a discussion around it. And yeah, I'd like this live to be very interactive. So please, I mean, there's 21 people watching. Please put in the chat, ask questions. You can put your questions in now. I will be responding to them throughout. But any questions you have, put in the chat. Anything you want to say, put it in the chat, and we can get into it. So who's here already? We've got Cami, YSR, Syndicate, The Gaming Den, and Mariposa. So welcome to the chat. If you're watching, you haven't said hello in the chat, please do say hello. So I thought a good place to start would be, so International Anti-Natalist Day. So there may be some people who don't know what an anti-natalist is or what anti-natalism is, right? They might not have heard this term before. And it can even be the case that someone is an anti-natalist, but they've never heard the term before, so they don't know they are, right? They have the ideas, but they don't know that that label sort of applies to them. Unknown has just joined the chat as well. Hey, Unknown. So an anti-natalist, you're going to get different answers from different people, as is the case with any group of people. They have different ideas around it. But generally, the idea is that it's the belief that coming into existence is a harm, and as a result, it's unethical to bring new sentient beings here. Now, that might sound a bit like philosophical or whatever, or rigid, but the sort of poster child phrase that anti-natalists use or are known for is the idea that it's immoral to have children, do not reproduce, that sort of thing. This is the sort of thing known. They have been, there's a couple of cases where anti-natalists have gotten into the media, so maybe like the average person would have heard of them, like Raphael Samuel in India. He, I believe, just threatened to sue his parents and for bringing him into the world. And it just went crazy. There was news stories all over the internet about him. He was doing radio shows all over the world. So a lot of people heard about him who weren't anti-natalists. In fact, I don't think I was aware of him at all, or really like, I can't remember what year it was that Raphael... Anyway, the point of what I'm saying is I was not really plugged into antinatalism at the time, or I wasn't antinatalist at the time, depending on when the date was. But even I heard like sort of murmurs of Raphael and what he'd done, right? But many people have. But the general idea is, and there's this group as well called Stop Having Kids who have hit some headlines as well in America. They're becoming more well known. Mariposa has put in the chat, what was it like talking to people at Speaker's Corner about antinatalism? So thank you for your question, Mariposa. If anyone has any other questions, please just put them in the chat. I'll be answering them as we go through. So what Mariposa is asking about there is myself and a few other antinatalists went to this place in London called Speaker's Corner. So Speaker's Corner is the northeast corner of Hyde Park, which is a very central park in London, maybe the most central. And that northeast corner has a history and a tradition of people going there, traditionally on a Sunday, but I'm pretty sure it happens every day now. But people go there and they take a stool, stand on it, and preach their message. So there are many religious people there. Nowadays, it's dominated by sort of Islamic apologists. So you get a lot of like Muslim YouTube channels and stuff filming there. But generally, any ideas are allowed to, are expressed there, and people debate them and stuff like that. That's the whole point of this place. So some anti-natalists, including myself, went there to hold signs with anti-natalist messages on and have conversations with people. And I believe I have 2 videos from Speaker's Corner now. I think 2 videos. And so what was it like talking to people there? So because it's a place where people go to discuss ideas, you get a couple of things. You get a lot of people who are very willing to listen to you or to engage with you. Often you will get people who are more willing to engage with you rather than listen to you. By that I mean you often get people who are there just to have an argument, and they're not necessarily really taking on board what you're saying and then responding to it. That's not everyone, of course. Obviously, there's lots of people there who want to consider what you're saying, and think about it and maybe take it on board if it makes sense to them. So we went and we did that, and I would say the vast majority of people pushed back. We did get some people who were sympathetic. We got some people who said that they can see the logic in the point of view, but they don't agree. We had some people come up to us and say that, I think there's some virtue in promoting a message of adopting over having a biological child. We did get a few people come up to us saying that. And we also got 1 or 2 people come up to us saying, I 100% agree with you, and I've thought this for ages, I just didn't know there was a word for it. So we did get a few people like that. But generally it was good, but the majority of the people you'll be interacting with will be Muslims, because Muslims dominate Speaker's Corner at the moment. So you will get a lot of pushback from that point of view, and then you can engage them with that. You can ask them about the idea of hellfire and all of this sort of stuff. But thank you for your question, Mariposa. What else have we got? Andy says, nice, thanks for plugging Stop Having Kids. Yeah, no worries. Choose Jesus says, have you ever met a Christian anti-natalist? Have I ever met a Christian anti-natalist? I know there are Christian anti-natalists. I don't know if I've ever met one. If I have, I don't think they made me aware that they were Christian. It might be slipping my mind. But we can talk about Christian anti-natalism a bit. It's actually something that I want to learn more about, especially because I have been doing some research into anti-natalist history recently, and there's an anti-natalist history of sort of Christian sects who seem to be anti-natalist. So I'm going to be looking into them soon. But you can, for me, and I'm not someone who so Choose Jesus is a Christian anti-natalist. Oh, well, that's cool to hear. Choose Jesus, how did you first come across the idea of anti-natalism? If you whack it in the chat and then we can discuss it. It'll be interesting to hear. So, where was I? Yeah. So it seems to me not extremely difficult to see where anti-natalism can fit into Christianity. The idea that the world is fallen. We're all sinners. Why would you want to create another sinner? Why would you want to bring someone into a fallen world? But also the fact that if you're someone who believes that hell is a place that someone you create may end up, then that is also a completely valid reason not to create someone. I mean, if you're an atheist, no matter how the world actually is, just in terms of your beliefs, if you're an atheist, presumably you don't believe that there is any form of hell. So when you create someone, you're creating them with the knowledge that, or the belief that they are only going to be exposed to harms in this life. Whereas if you are someone who believes in hell, especially eternal hell, which maybe there's different interpretations in Christianity, but I would assume at least some, or maybe most Christians do believe there's hell. Then, your understanding of the world is that you're bringing someone into it, and they will be exposed to the harm of the present world, but they may also end up in hell, and you can't entirely control how they're going to live their life, no matter how much you want to control how they're going to live their life. So you don't know if they're going to act in such a way where they would end up in hell. And that would be an awful thing, to have put someone on the path to ultimately end up in hell. So you can see why someone would be a Christian and get to the anti-natalist conclusion. There's a few pathways there. We've got Joshua says, we've got a donation. So this donation is from someone who hasn't given their name. So obviously I'm not going to read their name out. But thank you so much for donating. Absolute legend. Thank you for the support. It really helps. And this person says, so I'll go back to the chat in a minute. And I will catch up on the chat. I saw someone in the chat saying, why ask a question because I don't read the chat, which I do, and I especially will for this live stream. So if that person specifically has a question, please put it in the chat. But we've got this question here, which was attached to a donation. So they say, you said that anti-natalism is linked with veganism in a way. Do you think that you can be non-vegan and anti-natalist while being consistent in their anti-natalist belief? If yes, how? So this is an interesting one. So actually, this is something I was going to, not that, but this thing that I'm about to mention is something that I was going to bring up on this stream. So a couple of days ago, we had an anti-natalist meetup in London. And there's a group of us that meet in London sort of every few months. In the group, I think there's about 30 people now. But in terms of people who sort of regularly come to the meetup, there's probably a scattering of like 10 people. Not everyone comes to everyone, but we get like 5-6 people to each meetup. And the last meetup we were having a discussion around veganism and whether anti-natalists need to be vegan, right? Because the majority of the anti-natalist community is not vegan. So, and there's some non-vegan anti-natalists who feel, I think, quite like pressured or threatened by the vegan anti-natalists. And so we had a discussion around that. That's where the sort of discussion came from. And what I said in that discussion, and I'd say the same now, is that I think, so I am vegan and I'm anti-natalist, and I see a strong link between them. But I don't think we should be taking people's anti-natalist card away if they're not vegan. If someone holds the belief that it's unethical to bring humans into the world for philanthropic reasons, then I think that's the minimum you need to be able to be accurately called an anti-natalist. Now, and so I think anyone who believes that, then I'm not going to dispute them having the label. I'm not going to play gatekeeping. But I do think it is inconsistent to be an anti-natalist and be participating in systems that intentionally breed other sentient beings into existence. Because as an individual, if we're an anti-natalist and we're concerned with bringing beings into existence who can suffer, which I think is the fundamental reason why we don't want to bring humans into existence, is because they can suffer and be harmed in some way. That also applies to animals, or not all animals. There are some animals that aren't sentient, but other sentient beings who don't happen to be human, I think that also applies to them, right? And so we should avoid bringing them into existence as well. And so if you're an anti-natalist and you're thinking, okay, well, as an anti-natalist, I don't want to be bringing sensitive beings or beings that can suffer into the world. If you're thinking about that and how that would inform your behavior, it seems clear to me that actually, even though the most sort of prominent messages don't have kids, in terms of the numbers, the more obvious thing to me is actually don't participate in animal agriculture, because an anti-natalist who doesn't have a kid has just refrained from bringing like 1, 2, maybe 3 individuals into existence. If they weren't anti-natalist, maybe they would have 1, 2, 3 kids. But if you're an anti-natalist and you're not vegan, so you've refrained from bringing those 1, 2, 3 individuals into the world. But if you're bringing other sentient beings into the world, or you're paying for them to be brought into the world, through your dietary or other choices, because this would also be clothing and stuff like that. That to me seems inconsistent, because you're saying I don't want to bring beings into the world because of their capacity to suffer, and so I'm not bringing those 3 beings into existence, but these thousands of beings that I will be responsible for bringing into existence over the course of my lifetime, that bit I'm not going to address. That bit to me seems inconsistent, and so I don't want to gatekeep. I think if someone has the view that we shouldn't be bringing humans into existence for philanthropic reasons, reasons concerning the being who we're going to bring into existence, then I think that is enough for them to have the label, and I'm not going to fight people over that. But I do think what we need to do is encourage a norm in anti-natalist spaces that that we should not be bringing sentient beings into existence generally, and that scope should be wider than just our procreative choices. So, whether people want to debate over, oh, should you be vegan? Should you not be vegan? There are ways to eat animals or use animals in some ways that don't bring them into the world. Like I could eat roadkill or go hunting or something. I think that's true. I think you could live in a way where you could not be vegan and not be responsible for bringing extra sentient beings into existence, right? Like hunting or something like that. But I think in the effort to, as anti-natalists, because we don't want sentient beings to be brought into existence, we're opposed to moral agents bringing sentient beings into existence. I think we should encourage a culture where we don't play into the narrative that we should rely on bringing sentient beings into existence. So the reason I say that is because rather than someone going, where can I find these edge cases of being able to use animals and not be responsible for bringing them into existence, I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think the right way to go about it is we live in a world where sentient beings are used massively as means to ends, right? Especially animals, and they're completely abused. We don't want to bring sentient beings into existence, and so even though there are some practices that use animals and don't bring them into existence, it normalizes the use of animals in a world where it's so normal, and so it will encourage the culture that does all of that stuff. And so I think we should just generally err on the side of we should nurture a culture where we choose actions that don't bring sentient beings into existence, and try to avoid actions that are linked with that, if you get what I mean. So yeah, long story short, I don't think we should be taking people's anti-natalist cards away from them, but I do think we should be encouraging a norm of veganism in anti-natalist spaces. And that should be done with a tone of helping people and supporting people rather than shaming them, I think. But thank you so much for your donation and for your question. So going back to the chat, so Joshua asks, how would you fix the economy? I have no idea where that question came from, and it's not related to anti-natalism. So unless you can rephrase it being related to anti-natalism, then I'll have a go at answering it. But yeah, I'm gonna quickly go past that one for now. We've got one from Aprofondissement. I definitely have not said that right. How would you respond to the objection that anti-natalists are those who are most likely to improve the world, work towards decreasing suffering in all kinds of ways, whereas natalists are more likely people who would decrease it? People who would decrease it, it will be gone. I'm not quite getting that last bit. One can imagine a future society where only religious fanatics are left alive with no counterbalancing force. So there's kind of two things to say here, I guess. The first one is, should we be, doing something that we see as very clearly unethical in the here and now, to try and stave off some sort of distant, sort of somewhat intangible good that we can maybe appeal to. I don't think that argument of bringing anti-natalists into the world because or bringing like anti-natalists bringing children into the world because they may be like smarter or more rational. First of all, I'm not sure there's any evidence for anti-natalists being smarter than the average person. I'm not saying anti-natalists are stupider than the average person, but I don't know if it's intelligence that gets people to anti-natalism. It will be some people, they were intelligent and they've reasoned their way into it. But for a lot of people, like from my experience, a lot of people, it's a gut instinct or it's an emotional thing, which doesn't necessarily require intelligence. So I don't know if that's actually going to be true necessarily. But there are many ways that we can influence the world, right? So if you think about all of the people that come to mind when you think of people who change the world for the better, and have left a legacy that is doing good in the world, like out of those people, how many of them was their impact because they had a kid, if you get what I mean? Their impact was because of certain decisions they made and actions they took to change things in the here and now that had lasting effects. And I think anti-natalists can do the same thing now, right? I don't think we should be creating people to then give them the burden and responsibility of changing the world in the future. I think we should take it upon ourselves to try and create that change in the here and now and get organized and pull our fingers out, basically. If you're particularly concerned with religious fundamentalism, then as an anti-natalist, I would say don't procreate. You will then have a lot more time and a lot more resources to be able to go to promoting secularism or atheism or whatever you want to promote, or critical thinking, this sort of stuff. So I think it would be a worse place if the world did end up being full of religious fanatics, although there's a lot of religious fanatics in the world at the moment. And so I think we should try and do things to stave that off. But I don't think the way to do that is do something that is very obviously unethical in the here and now for fairly speculative sort of long-term outcomes. That would be my general view on it. I think find things that you can do in the here and now, and yeah, take it upon yourself to create the change. And you know what? That will probably end up doing a lot more good than you putting it on a kid who maybe will choose to not do, any of the things you wanted them to do. Anna's in the chat. Hey, Anna. Let's see if there are any more questions. So we've got Mariposa again. I'm not sure if you ever came across the trolley problem, but how would you answer the trolley problem? Well, in the moment, I've honestly no idea what I would do. But and also there are so many variations on the trolley problem. But if I have a decision to make as to whether one person is going to die or 5 people are going to die, I'm probably going to choose the one person. And it's not for any elaborate special reasons. It's for the reasons that you would have typically heard people make justifications for that one. I'm just going to call you AppPro because I don't know how to say the full name. Says, I'm in London. Where can I sign up for a meetup? Amazing. So yeah, we've got a meetup coming up in May sometime. We've got someone visiting from Singapore, which we're excited to join us. So yeah, definitely join us. My email is in the description of this live stream, or just go onto my channel and go on any video in the description. You can find my email. Send me an email, and we have a WhatsApp group. I'll get you into it. Anti-natalism says, among the arguments for anti-natalism, which one do you find most compelling? Conversely, which one seems least persuasive? So when I say, so I'm going to answer this question in terms of what I find the most convincing. I'm not saying this is the most convincing one to everyone. I'm not saying this is the one that I've presented and has convinced the most people. I'm just saying I think there's value in each of the main arguments that I've heard, but the main one that I find the most convincing and I always come back to and sort of just really underlies why I'm an anti-natalist is it's not on its own an argument for anti-natalism, but you know what I mean. It's the axiological asymmetry. I just see no good done in creating someone simply so they can experience good things. I just see no value in that. I think it's simply creating someone who would need good stuff in their life and then providing them with that good stuff. But there would have been no need for that good stuff. It wouldn't even have been classified as good stuff because before that person exists, there would be no one in existence for that to even be of value to them. But conversely and asymmetrically, even though there's no one in existence at the point to make this judgment, bringing someone into existence to suffer seems to me completely unethical. And so there's that asymmetry there of I just see no value in creating someone so that they can have a happy life. But creating someone and them having a bad life is horrible. So yeah, that's the one that, really gets to me. And then conversely, which one seems least persuasive? I would have to think about it. But the thing is that I've been presented by so many people different arguments for anti-natalism. People saying like, I've got a new one here or blah, blah, blah. Like, there are loads of them where I've thought I just don't see where you're going with that. I think we should stay with these tried and tested ones that I think are good. I don't know where you're quite going with that one. But the thing is because I didn't find them compelling, and given that they probably aren't compelling generally, which is why they haven't sort of risen to prominence, I can't remember them. But there are many arguments out there for anti-natalism that aren't that compelling. But I would guess out of the three main ones, so the axiological asymmetry, consent argument, and the risk argument, and maybe there are more main ones that I'm not thinking of that other people are going to shout me down for not including. But out of those three, which one is the least persuasive? For me, I would say the risk argument, even though I do find the risk argument persuasive, but I find them all persuasive, but it's just that one is the least of them. But in terms of like talking to other people who you're trying to convince of anti-natalism, I would say the risk argument is actually the simplest, and the axiological asymmetry and the consent argument both get into territory that really confuses people and causes a lot of pushback. So yeah, the risk argument could actually be the most persuasive one generally. But yeah, that's my answer to your question. Hey Prasad, nice to have you in the chat, and Alien Warfield. So sorry, not Alien Warfield, Alan. So Alan asks, isn't just the ethical position alone enough to deem a person AN? You can even have children and hold that position. I don't necessarily think so. I mean, you can have children in that you've had children in the past, and you're an anti-natalist, or there's some extenuating circumstances and you accidentally have a child but you don't want to abort them and you're anti-natalist. But to hold that viewpoint and then intentionally bring someone into the world, I mean, I would admit that if they still maintain that worldview, then I guess they still maintain that worldview. But to label that person an anti-natalist, to me, would be pretty jarring. And I don't know, because to me, it would be like if someone says they are I'm vegan in terms of ethics. I think we should extend the same rights to animals as we do to humans that are relevant to them. So obviously they don't need to vote, but they will need protection from harm. But that I'm gonna eat them as well. I would understand that they have ethics that are like vegan ethics, but whether I would give that person the label of vegan, I would find that like very jarring as well, and I would see that as sort of like a similar case. Yeah, but if you hold a different opinion, please put it in the chat. Let me know. Okay, so who's next? We've got Capitalist for Life. So if you were people means, maybe that's supposed to say if fewer people means less wealth gets generated. How do you pay social security to old people when there aren't enough workers? So this is an interesting one. So this is something that we're going to be seeing more and more of, because the birth rates in many areas of the world are going down, which obviously has nothing to do with anti-natalism. So people often bring this point up to anti-natalists, but I actually don't think it's more relevant for other groups than it is, or it's just more relevant for society generally, or economists to figure out, or demographers or politicians, rather than anti-natalists. But it's an interesting one. So birth rates are already falling below replacement rate for many countries, generally the developed ones. And it will be interesting to see where it goes. I mean, the future is very uncertain, right, for many reasons. But one of the reasons is artificial intelligence. And there are some people positing that artificial intelligence is, because from the Industrial Revolution to now, my understanding is that economic growth has been heavily correlated, and maybe there's a causal link there, but it's been very heavily correlated with increasing population. Now, that chain is either going to get broken very soon or somewhat soon, or it's not going to get broken and the population will start to go down and we will see economic decline. It could be the case that the chain gets broken and AI and the developments in AI will carry the baton, if you get what I mean, like handed over from population growth. So that could happen, but I'm not entirely sure. But in terms of if that didn't happen, and with decreasing populations, how would we have enough workers to be taxed to pay for social security for elderly people? Well, I mean, the main thing is I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how that would happen. There are economists much smarter than me that will be much more informed to actually answer that question. I know there is a book, which I haven't read yet, but I plan to read it. But I'm just letting people know if they would like to go read it, called Decline and Prosper, which is about, as far as I'm aware, again, I haven't read it yet, but my understanding is that it's about the economics of declining birth rates and populations, and how and can we, and I think in this book they posit that we can still live high quality lives, maybe to the same quality that we live now, or standard of living, but with a declining population or a smaller population. So if you want to know what's in that book, go read that book. It's easy to find on Amazon. But another point that comes to mind is there are definitely going to be problems that are caused by declining birth rates, as we can already see in some places. The first thing I want to say is no one should be putting this at the feet of anti-natalists. We have had nothing to do with this. This has been other forces like women entering the workforce, a decrease in infant mortality, these sorts of things. But nonetheless, whether it's caused by anti-natalists or not, there will be issues that are caused by it, one of them being less taxpayers. And yeah, I don't think anti-natalists or anyone should shy away from this fact. I think we should recognize that there are going to be problems from the declining birth rate, and all of the measures that have been put in place already to try and tackle that don't seem to have worked. I haven't seen any successful cases of of government policies or anything that have been put in place that have sort of significantly brought birth rates back up. So it looks like it might be a problem that's going to stay. And I think those are issues that we're going to have to figure out in some way, because just because we have an issue that there are not enough taxpayers, and I've just heard there's another donation come in, super chat actually, which I'm going to get to right after I've finished answering this question, and I'll be done very soon. But thank you so much to whoever donated that. I'm going to check in a minute. But I think where was I? Yeah, so I think there will be real issues and causes for concern. And I think we have to deal with those as the people who are already here. I don't think those are issues that we can just create new people to solve. I think that's very unfair on the new people. Just because if, I will be an old person at some point, and actually when I'm an old person, if I make it that far, I'm probably going to live in a world where the birth rates are much lower than they are now. But I don't think my problem as an old person, I don't think I just get to say, yep, let's just create more people to solve my problem. I'm here, and yeah, it's not my fault that I'm here, but nonetheless, it's my problem that's on me, or the other people that exist here now. And we've got to work together in some way to try and make the best of what could be a bad situation. I don't think that creating someone else simply so we can solve our own problems is a responsible thing to do or an ethical thing to do. Another point to make, obviously, is that at some point we will have to face this. Like humans, well, there's kind of two separate questions, but in terms of generally extinction, human population declining and going extinct, or it could happen very quickly. Like humans will go extinct at some point. This is not a decision about, if we just don't let anti-natalism catch on, then we'll just continue forever. That isn't the case. Humans will go extinct at some point. And so it's not a decision as to whether we go extinct. It's a decision as to when and in what manner. And I think if what anti-natalists would advocate for is, well, it would depend on the anti-natalist, but we should cease reproduction sooner rather than later, and manage the decline of humanity so that there is as little burden on those in the last generation or the last few generations as possible. But there will be some burden, and you can't escape that. But that's not just on anti-natalists or anyone else who may, be involved in advocating for a position that would imply a sooner extinction, because even if extinction happens a long way off, it's still going to happen. So it's not a problem we can avoid. Like we have to have a discussion about it, and we have to face it. What's also the case is that in the future there could be many, many more people, which means that if some extinction event happens, then there's going to be a lot more victims to it, which is also something to take into consideration. Like there's around 8 billion people on the planet at the moment. There could be many more in the future. If something went wrong now, it would be bad. If something went wrong in the future when there were many more people, that would be way, way worse. And also we'd probably have a lot more technology that could do a lot more harm in the future. So maybe the extinction could happen in a lot worse way. Who knows? I'm not sure. But anyway, I think I may be rambling a bit. So, oh no, we had a donation. So we had a super chat, and I think it shows it. Yes, it does show it, so people can see. So that's from Shantanu. Thank you so much, Shantanu. It's the first super chat of this stream. Thanks so much for supporting. It really helps with covering costs for software I need to use and all of this sort of stuff. So it's really appreciated. And Shantanu didn't leave a question or a message or anything. So Shantanu, if you have any sort of comment or question, please put it in the chat and I will get to it. I actually see you have left one, so let's get to yours straight away. I'm assuming it's for me. I don't know if you've been having a conversation. Let's get to Shantanu straight away. So Shantanu says, if you want to make someone, and then either you have to make him or her love their child more than the limit, or you have to make them pure beyond all limit. I think all limit of love and purity is very limited. So I'm not quite sure what you've said there, Shantanu, but what I'm guessing that you're saying is that some people want to create someone because they want to show them all the love that that they can, right? You know, you hear people say, I want to create someone because I want to, you know, give them amazing love and give them an amazing life and pour all my love into them. And like, honestly, I understand where people are coming from. Like, I don't want to shame people for that. Wanting to, you know, express your love to someone else is a very natural and understandable pursuit and emotion. But we've got to kind of look under the sort of warm and fuzzy feelings and thoughts of love and affection, and understand, why are you actually creating that person? If you think about it, you're creating someone who, no matter how much love you put on them, they will suffer in their life and they will ultimately die as well. And the reason that you're doing that is so that you can get the experience and the feeling of pouring your love and affection into someone. And so whilst I don't want to frame this in a shamey way or anything like that, you are essentially imposing harm on someone and death on someone ultimately, because you stand to benefit from it. And I don't think that is a good reason to procreate and create someone. So even though I can understand where someone is coming from with their feeling, I think it's misguided. And I think if you want to do that with the people who need your help in the here and now and the people around you, and even adopt someone, you know, because then you're taking someone who is already in a shit situation and you can hopefully maybe improve their life, rather than create someone else who simply didn't need to be here, and who will suffer if you do bring them here. But thank you so much for the donation, Shantanu, and thank you for the question and the comment. Right, let's scroll back up and get to, so Caesar asks, I actually had a whole list of things that I was going to talk about if people didn't submit questions, but it's great that people have been submitting loads of questions. So I haven't even started on the list that I brought. So Caesar says, or asks, would you hold a speech at Tedx about anti-natalism? I would be very happy to give a talk about anti-natalism. I don't know if I'm the best qualified. And I don't know if I am the sort of person that would even get on TEDx. Like, I would presume you need some sort of credentials, or at least public standing, some sort of, be a public figure. I'm neither of those. But I do plan in the future to give some sort of talk on anti-natalism, even if that's just at a local society or something, then film it and put it online available. Because I do want to sort of give a talk where I present anti-natalism in a way that I think is accurate, covers a decent amount of ground, is relatable to the average person, or as relatable as it can be. So that is something I do want to do at some point in the future. But TEDx, I mean, that's aiming above at where I was aiming at, but yeah, who knows? Thanks for that, Caesar. Choose Jesus says, what do you think about declining birth rates in many countries? So I've already kind of commented on that. The only thing I'd add is that it is something that is going to, if we're looking at it in terms of its impact on society, it is something that is going to cause issues. I think it is something that has already started to happen. It's going to continue to happen. The fight back against it with the pro-natalist policies that governments have already brought in don't seem to have been working, even quite generous ones. And I think instead of what has been the current reaction, which is to resist it, I think what is probably a more responsible and ethical way of responding to it is by embracing it and taking the approach of, this is something that's going to happen, and we're currently framing it as something that can only do damage. Why don't we frame it as something, as an opportunity? You know, this is a demographic trend that is happening, and we're probably not going to stop it. How can we ride this sort of demographic trend to improve the world, and make the lives of all those who will come into existence better lives? Exactly how that cashes out and how the future will go, I don't know how the future's going to go. But I think that's probably a more responsible approach to the declining birth rates. Cool. Thank you for that. Choose Jesus. Cami asks, hey, Lawrence, I wonder if you have seen Kane B. Yes, I have. He makes videos about philosophy and has many videos on pessimism and anti-natalism. Would you ever consider talking to him? Yes, I actually have a draft email from quite a while ago still in my email that I haven't got around to finishing, where I was going to invite him on. But the reason I haven't finished it or sent it yet is because I know that he has produced a decent amount of content around this, like you said. And I want to watch all of that and consume all of that before talking to him. So that I know where he's coming from, and also so I can see what his thoughts are on it, and be able to then structure a conversation around that. It would be odd for me to just approach him and say, hey, I've seen you talk about anti-natalism. I have not watched anything that you've said, but let's have a conversation. I mean, that could happen, and it may end up being really good, but I've seen there's another donation just come through. I'm going to get to that right now. But yeah, I'm basically waiting to just watch more of his content. I need to get around to it, and then I'll invite him on. But thanks so much for mentioning that, Cami. That reminds me. Shantanu sent in another donation. Thank you so much, Shantanu. What an absolute legend. And it said, I've sent another question. Please read. All right. Where's Shantanu's next question? I see. I think it's a sin or a crime to have a child because there is a possibility of child being dead during birth, or have so like stillborn, or have some serious chronic disease or some birth defects. It is not wrong or risky. Yes, so that's basically, I think, what you're articulating there, Shantanu, is the risk argument. Basically, like, all of us will experience some suffering and ultimately death, but there are some individuals who, when they're brought into existence, there's some group of individuals who will have extraordinarily bad lives. So these will be the people who, you know, have some serious chronic disease or a birth defect that, you know, leaves them horribly malformed or something like that. And you also say stillborn. Obviously that child will be stillborn, so they won't be born alive, so they, you know, they won't have these sort of issues, because they'll have already died. But yeah, in terms of like individuals being brought into the world that have, like, you know, there's these conditions where people's skin doesn't heal and it peels off and they can't really touch anything, or, you know, I even saw someone allergic to water. You know, there are all sorts of like horrible things. And these are all people that are being touched upon in the risk argument. And the risk argument is basically saying, like I said, you know, everyone experiences some suffering, and you may see it as fine to bring those people into existence because you may say, look, they'll experience some suffering, but overall they'll have a happy life. But the risk argument says that's fine, but there is a subcategory of people, let's say maybe even if it's like 1 to 5% or whatever, who will have really bad lives. And that can be categorized in all sorts of ways. Given the fact that the people who it would be fine on this person's view to bring into existence, they don't need to be brought into existence. They don't exist to want to be brought into existence. And so not bringing them into existence wouldn't be doing anything wrong. It wouldn't be harming them in any way. And so if it's not, let's just make up some numbers, split it 95% to 5%. If it's not wrong to not bring into existence that 95%, because even though if they came into existence, they've had, they would have decent lives, not creating them is not going to harm anyone. And if the cost of creating those 95% is the 5% who have horrible lives, then it's better not to take that gamble, right? Well, there's kind of two things going on here. The first is on the individual level, which is saying if you create someone, it's unethical to take that risk on their behalf, because there's that 5% or whatever chance that they will be the child with an extraordinarily bad life. And there's also kind of like the population level of like every generation that we create, there will be the people who are happy that they're brought into existence, and there will be the people that are miserable they're brought into existence and regret it. And that cost is a high price to pay for the individuals who wouldn't have regretted not having come into existence, because they wouldn't have existed to regret it, if you get what I mean. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Shantanu, and thank you for the second donation as well. What a top legend. So we've got on to Louis is now asking, do you think that there may be more people who embrace antinatalism in places where more people suffer from the consequences of excess population resource shortages? So long story short, I don't entirely know, because and it depends how you measure it as well. But two places that I can comment on are India has quite an active anti-natalist scene, and famously the most populous country. So maybe there's something going on there, but there's some sort of correlation there. But another place that has a lot of anti-natalist activity. So there's an Arabic Facebook group with over 1 million people in it, which is, I believe, the biggest social media anti-natalist group ever. Now, I don't know what goes on in there. I don't know who the people are, because I don't speak Arabic, so it's kind of impenetrable to me. But Arabic is primarily spoken in the Middle East. I think everyone probably knows the Middle East has had a lot of conflict, and a lot of people have been put through miserable things there. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that that area of the world, the language that's spoken there, has the largest Facebook group for anti-natalism. That doesn't surprise me. And that's not exactly what you were asking, but I think it's kind of related. So yeah, I think that those would be all my thoughts on that. But thank you for the question, Louis. If you've got any others, please send them. Anna asks, despite being anti-natalist, I often worry about the suffering that extinction would cause, such as there being a lot of old or sick people without any younger people to take care of them. Any thoughts? So the first thing to say, I've already given some thoughts on this earlier in the stream, but I know that people will be coming in and out. To somewhat restate my thoughts. So I think two things. I agree with you. Like, I don't like the idea of people suffering. I don't like the idea of particularly elderly people who are often very vulnerable being in a situation where they can't get the help they necessarily need. I wouldn't want that for myself. I wouldn't want that for others. So yeah, that's something that I struggle to think about. The other things to say are, even though that seems like that's not a nice thing to think about, and I think it is something we should try and alleviate, the suffering of those people, and any suffering in the future of those people we should try and alleviate. But I don't think that warrants bringing new people into existence, because that is simply alleviating the suffering of one person by imposing suffering on another person, and then on top of that putting the responsibility on them to solve the problems of that elderly person. The second thing is that at some point humans will go extinct. There is obviously a question about whether that would be like a slow managed decline, or a slow unmanaged decline, or a very quick managed or unmanaged decline. But at some point humans will go extinct, and so this is a problem that we are just going to need to face. And it's not something we can get away from. It's not a unique problem posed by anti-natalism. I mean, it's not a problem posed by anti-natalism at all at the moment, because it's not a significant force in the world. But even if it was, it wouldn't be a unique problem posed by antinatalism. This is just something we're going to have to face at some point. And yeah, I don't like it. The goal of antinatalism is not to cause more problem and more suffering for people. The whole point of antinatalism is not to want to impose it on another person by creating them. But unfortunately, we live in a world which is very complicated and unfortunate. And it's that when you pursue doing what you see as trying to avoid doing unethical things and imposing harm on others, we live in a world where that can cause other forms of harm, and so we've got to navigate that in some way. So yeah, I don't think it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing, and it's not nice to think about. But it's something we're just going to have to face at some point. But thank you, Anna, for that. I'm just going to take a quick drink. So, tailgate activism. You should not shame anti-vegans that claim to be anti-natalist. That's very sympathetic and anti-vegan. Let me just understand. So the question is, oh, hang on, we've just had a donation, so I'll get back to you, tailgate. So we've just had a super chat. So we've just had a super chat from Gerenchik with no message, but thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate it. All of this support is thank you so much for helping me cover these costs, because like I said, it really helps. And just to give you an example, the next thing that I'm wanting to invest in, which will improve the content in the channel, is a street microphone, so that I can do interviews with people, talk to people. So for example, those Speakers Corner, there's going to be some more Speakers Corner videos coming. There's also going to be some in-person interviews that I'm going to try and do with some people, with specific people that some of you may probably know, but I won't reveal who they are at the moment. And this interview microphone will be really useful for that. So thank you for all the support people are giving, because it does go to things that really help. And I've just seen that Gerenchik has put a question, so I'm going to go to that quickly first, because they donated, and then I will come back to tailgate. So they ask, have you heard of technological singularity expected to happen by 2050, forecasted by Kurzweil and experts? Would its fruits make lives of newcomers much less miserable? So my understanding when people use the term technological singularity is essentially we can look into the future and have different, we can have an expectation of how the future will go as pertaining to technological development, but a technological singularity, in my understanding, is a point at which we don't know what the future looks like past that point. And people are pointing to artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence as being a technological singularity. So I've not heard of the specific person you're mentioning. I don't know if that's like a specific theory or speculation that is, that I should be aware of. But the general idea of it I'm aware of. And you ask, would its fruits make the lives of newcomers much less miserable? It depends. It's a singularity. I mean, we don't know how it's going to go. I mean, if we're talking about artificial general intelligence, that has the capacity to ease reduce a lot of harm and make the lives of those who will come into existence a lot better. But it could also do the opposite. It could also do, or it could be used in such a way where it makes the lives of those who come into existence much worse than they otherwise would have been. So it's a tricky one. I mean, it's a singularity, right? No one knows exactly how it's all going to unfold. Which way am I going? Okay, I'm in the middle here. But But thank you so much for the donation, the support, and the question. Right, let's go back to, where's Tailgate? There's Tailgate. Okay, so Tailgate says you should not shame. So Tailgate saying that I said you should not shame anti-vegans that claim to be anti-natalist. That's very sympathetic and anti-vegan. So that's not what I said, right? If someone's an anti-vegan, right, they're actively going against vegans and promoting the use and consumption of animals, then again, I don't know if shaming would be the most effective way forward. I mean, I think you could, combat them in other ways, maybe even ridicule them if they're being really stupid. You should obviously push back on them. But I wasn't talking about anti-vegans. I mean, maybe I said anti-vegan and I misspoke. I didn't mean to say anti-vegan. I just mean like non-vegan anti-natalists. If someone's a non-vegan anti-natalist, look, I think they should be vegan, and I think we should talk to them about veganism and nurture a culture where veganism is encouraged and seen as an aspiration for any anti-natalist that comes into the community, not just for the arguments for veganism, but as an anti-natalist position, as part of an anti-natalist position. I don't think shaming would, if we're talking about those non-vegans, and I'm even skeptical about the anti-vegans as well, but if we're talking about non-vegans, I don't think shaming is going to be productive. I think we should come to them wanting to support them into becoming vegan, and explain the why and help provide the how. And I just don't see why. Shaming would be a productive part of that. Naturalist Ted says, what use is not existing if I didn't exist before and it didn't stop a life from being imposed? So for anyone that doesn't know, this is sort of like Naturalist Ted's sort of general point he always makes on like every video he posts on. I think enough people have addressed it and it just doesn't hold any water. So I'm gonna move on because so many people have replied to that. So Cami asks, what was your reaction to David Benatar on Carnism Debunks podcast? And are you excited to see his new paper he's writing on wild animal suffering? Have you ever reached out to have David Benatar on? So a couple of things here. First thing is, you can see my reaction to David Benatar's appearance on Carnism Debunked, because I did a whole live stream on it with George Martin, who runs Carnism Debunked. So if you go, Cami, if you go to the live tab on my channel, and it's a few lives down, it's not many down, it's like 3 or 4 down, and you'll see it there. It's got a picture of me, George Martin, and then a child and a lion going at each other. So you can find my thoughts there. Yes, I'm excited for his paper. I don't know if it's specifically on wild animal suffering. Well, I guess it's related, but I think at least he said it's specifically on the predator question about whether, whether we should or whether it's consistent with veganism to kill predators. But yes, I'm excited about that and interested about that. Another thing that you maybe, I don't know if you're aware of, which you maybe have missed, given you didn't include it in your question, is that he's got a new book coming out called Very Practical Ethics. It is listed online. There's not been any sort of marketing or publicizing of it, but it is available for pre-order online. You can find, if you just type in Very Practical Ethics David Benatar in Google, it'll come up. But the website that lists it is having maintenance at the moment, so no orders can be made, no pre-orders. It comes out on the 1st of October, I think, but no pre-orders can be made at the moment. And they said that pre-orders should be able to be made when their maintenance is done in early April, and it's early April now, moving into mid-April, so hopefully that'll be very soon. And then the last thing Cami asked is, have you ever reached out to have David Benatar on? Yes, I have. But I reached out to him at a time when he was very busy, and he tentatively said yes. But then when it got closer to the time, he had a clash, and he was very busy, so he couldn't make it. So, but I plan to get him on in the future, and I have specific topics I want to talk to him about that I don't think he's talked about before, and they're related to antinatalism, but they're different from what he's talked about before. And I know that he doesn't like hitting on the same thing multiple times quite often. So hopefully, if I invite him at some point, I can ask him those. Maybe around the time his book comes out, because that'll be an opportunity to reach out to him, and he'll be sort of in the zone for appearances. So, yeah, hopefully that'll happen. Have we got... So I'm going to try and say your name correctly. Gedikov. Says hi from Russia. Hello from Russia. Thanks for tuning in. Well, no, hello to Russia. I'm from England. On your channel, Karima Kerma mentioned that already in the 19th century, some realized that declining birth rates helped to increase wages. I think this is still actual in many places. That could be true. And actually, it's funny you say that, because one of the things I'm working on at the moment, and the video will come out on Saturday. Usually I publish on Sunday, but my next video is going to be on Saturday, and there's a specific reason for that. And it is going to be about the anti-natalist Marie Yu, right? And I actually had her on my list of things I brought today to speak through. I actually listed her on that because I thought I would need that list, but there's so many questions I don't. So she was an anti-natalist from the 1800s, early 1900s. Anyway, there's so much I could say on her, and if we run out of questions, I will do a bit on her. But anyway, the full video on her will be coming out on Saturday, so you'll get all the information then. But she was an anti-natalist for anti-natalist reasons, because she didn't want to, and she didn't want other people to create people who can suffer, right? So she had a care for the individuals who would have been created. But she also had additional reasons for essentially protesting procreation, right? And one of them was that she was an anti-capitalist, she was a socialist, and she actually explicitly speaks about in some of her writings and her talks that the capitalists are pro-natalist. They encourage people to procreate because they want more wage slaves, and they know that if birth rates decline and there's less wage slaves, wages will go up. So actually, she is probably one of the people that Kareem was, and I know Kareem is aware of her. In fact, Kareem, helped me in part on putting this video together. She's probably one of the people that he was mentioning that you're asking about. So very interesting stuff. Stay tuned for Saturday. Okay, where's the next question? Apologies if I miss anyone's question, because sometimes I'm sort of going through the chat and sometimes I can't tell if it's a question or not. But the next one I think is from Alan. Where anti-natalism parts from veganism is that veganism is a lifestyle choice that can sourced from your ethics. Anti-natalism is an ethical position that can affect your lifestyle choices, being child-free, etc. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding what you mean, but I think both veganism and anti-natalism are ethical positions that impact the decisions and behaviors that you make and partake in, right? So veganism, like, people define it in different ways, but generally it means an ethical position where animals have moral value to the point that we should essentially not be using them as property, is sort of like the basic, sort of, there are slightly different ways people cash it out, but that's the basic moral principle. And from that, certain behaviors follow, like not eating them, not using them as property, not, using them in animal testing, or, wearing them as a leather belt, all this sort of stuff. And it's the same with anti-natalism. Anti-natalism is an ethical position, and from that, certain behaviors follow, like not having not reproducing, not paying for other sentient beings to be brought into existence, all of that sort of stuff. So I kind of see them as similar in that ways, but maybe I'm not understanding your your point. Okay, so Jaren Chick says, shall be reproduction ceased purely on voluntary basis? I think what Jaren is saying there is, like, it should anti-natalism all be voluntary? Yes, we should. Yeah, we should not be going around forcing people and, violating their bodily autonomy. Anti-natalism, anti-natalism itself only informs of a voluntary negative duty of not wanting to bring other sentient beings into existence. You can add an additional thing on top of that of wanting to meddle in the lives of others, but that's not anti-natalism. It may be the motivation of it on your part may be your anti-natalist beliefs, but the actual willingness and rationalization to do that is separate from anti-natalism. It's an additional thing that you're holding on top of it. But no, I think it should be voluntary. I think the furthest extent I would be comfortable with is in the general population is some anti-natalist policies being brought in where there are certain incentive changes, because at the moment there are incentives around procreation, and generally, depends exactly where you go, but generally the incentives are to encourage procreation. So the furthest I would go in terms of coercion would be some government policies that change incentives. So one example could be, I'm not saying this would work in practicality, I'd have to think about it a bit more, but this is just the off-the-cuff sort of example that I can imagine. This is the sort of vibe that someone would be going for, is for each child you have, maybe there's an increase of 1 or 2% on your income tax or something like that. So it's not forcing someone to do something, but there are incentives built into society that dissuade people from procreation, as an example. But anyway, thank you for your question. Let's see. Comwave says, when are you going to interview Benatar? Hopefully at some point this year. But I've already said a bit more about that in response to Cammy's question. So hopefully you heard that. We also had another donation from Geren or Jeren Chick as well. Again, thank you so much for the support. So they ask, is procreation a way to escape a fear of death, aging? It depends what you mean. So I don't think so. Wait, let me just go back to the question. So is procreation a way to escape the fear of death and aging? Well, there's a yes and a no, obviously. I mean, if you don't create someone, then obviously you're not creating someone who will age or have a fear of death. So it stops there being more of it through your actions. But in terms of, does it stop your own fear of death and your own aging? I don't believe so. I don't think so. Maybe if anti-natalists, obviously it doesn't have a correlation with aging because everyone's going to age if they live long enough to. If someone did a study, maybe they would find some sort of correlation between anti-natalism and a reduced fear of death. I don't know if there would be, and I don't know if there was, what direction it would be in, but they could interact in some way, but I'm not sure. It's an interesting one to think about. Thank you, Jaren Chick. Okay, so the next one is, let me just have another drink. Okay, so Mario asks, you keep saying that not birthing a child is not harmful to anyone, but it actually may be so to the would-be parents missing parenthood. Isn't this a weak bit of the argument? So I'm not entirely sure what you mean by a weak bit of the argument. I think maybe what you're implying is like, isn't it a weak, isn't it not, isn't it incomplete to not take that into consideration? Um, Look, if there are people who are, really dead set on procreating, and um, not procreating is going to leave them worse off, maybe they feel slightly less or even significantly less satisfied through life. Again, it's the same thing as the situation of like elderly people in like the last generation or whatever. It's an unfortunate situation. Like, look, this is why I don't want to bring anyone else into the world, because the world is a harsh place. It does not exist to be convenient or conform to your desires, and neither does ethics. Um, if you desire to have a child, we've got to, or procreate specifically, we've got to consider what are the ethics of that act. And if you come to the conclusion that it would be unethical to do that, and that is going to, and then allowing that to inform your behavior and not have a child is going to impact your life satisfaction, that's unfortunate. And it's just something that the people who have that dissatisfaction will have to learn to overcome in some way, right? Like, I am by no means saying that I had a bad case of this at all, but I used to be like very pro-natalist in terms of my own desires. I definitely wanted to procreate and have my own children. And then I came across anti-natalism, was convinced, and I was like, oh, fuck, well, I'm not having children then, am I? Or I'm not procreating. And for a time, there was a bit of emotional like discord, but the desires faded over time, and now it doesn't really bother me that much at all. And so, look, maybe mine was like an easy case, and I'm like one of the lucky ones, right? But if someone has more discord than I did, that doesn't make it then okay to create the child, because you're just imposing suffering and death on someone to solve your own problem. And I don't view that as ethical. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd say. I mean, again, I don't want to downplay the unfortunate nature of it. Like, I think all of this is unfortunate, which is why I think it's unfortunate that any of us came into existence in the first place. But yeah, it's an unfortunate situation, and we will have to try and deal with it in our own lives if it comes up. And look, maybe I'll get to like 30, 40 years old and I'll be like, fuck, I really do want to have procreated now, and I really do want to have had like a child that I can see myself in. That's a problem I'm going to have to deal with myself. It's my problem. Now, that's not to say that people should just be isolated and deal with their problems on their own. Obviously, we should be in communities and help each other get over each other's issues that they're facing. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I think we should do that, and that's a healthy way to go about it. But I'm just saying that just because acting in an ethical way causes us some discord, that's not an argument against doing the that's not an argument for doing the unethical thing. Like when I first became vegan, I had some navigating of the new diet. Any dietary change has a navigation period where you're not used to it and you've got to change and stuff, and there was some discomfort there. I was used to eating a certain way. Does that discomfort, like, even if it was a significant discomfort at some point, does that justify me then paying for animals to be stabbed in the throat? I don't think so. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that one. Thank you, Mario, for the question. Louis says, excellent response to my question regarding regions with excessive population embracing anti-natalism. I think you are more right in suggesting that it's probably more related to excessive suffering. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see them being related 100%. And then we've got from Anti-natalism. Is there any chance Kansu, I'm not sure I'm saying her name right actually there, will be a future guest on anti-natalism around the world? Well, I didn't want to spoil it, but 100% I would love to get her on. One of the next episodes of Anti-natalism around the world I wanted to do was on Turkey. I'm yet to reach out to her, and I don't know why I haven't already, but 100%. I don't know anti-natalism if you're asking because you are from or in Turkey. If you are, please send me an email with any things that you think we should touch on in the interview, anything about Turkish anti-natalism. Are there any things going on at the moment? Are there any historical figures in Turkey that were anti-natalist? How does anti-natalism interact with the culture? What's it like to have a conversation with the average person about anti-natalism? All of this sort of stuff. Please send me an email with any sort of suggestions you have. But yes, definitely. Okay, where else are we? So I'm trying to figure out which just if you're asking a question, please put a question mark at the end of it, because sometimes people aren't, and I can't quite tell if they are questions or not. So Comwave says, who do you think are more likely to be anti-natalist, left-wing people or right-wing people? I would probably say I've seen more. In terms of the people that I would expect to be more open to anti-natalism and who I have seen be anti-natalist more is left-wing people. And I actually personally don't like dividing ethical issues along political lines, but I do think there is a bit of, and I do think someone can be conservative or right-wing and be anti-natalist, because someone can be right-wing or left-wing and have like one or two standout opinions that don't necessarily fall in line with the rest of things. But I would say pretty fundamental to being right-wing is like family values and that sort of stuff. So there may be a bit of discord there, but fundamentally, I think someone can be right wing or left wing and anti-natalist. But it's probably to my knowledge, it's more common for anti-natalist to be left wing. Ali, I'm not sure if they're asking me this. If they are, thank you. Just ask, how are you? I'm doing very well, thank you. And I'm glad this is working out, this new live with the vertical live. It seems to be going relatively well. We've had loads of questions from people, lots of new people. Usually when I do live streams, there are, the regulars who come back every time, and I'm so appreciative of those people, and I recognize their names when they come up. And there are some of them here today, and thanks so much for being here. Like just who I've got on screen now. Louis is a regular. Bungbean comes to the lives. Who else can I see who comes? J.E. Tyler, I'm pretty sure you've been a few times, haven't you? Who else can I see? Mertranshumaners, or I don't know how to say your name, but I recognize your name. Cami. Yeah, there's a few people. CDA Activism is here. If there's anyone who's a regular who watches my lives regularly, please say hello in the chat, and I'll give you a shout out. Yeah, there are regulars who come to my lives, and I'm so appreciative for those people. But this format of vertical live streaming, so on my normal lives, I will probably have like between 20 to 40 people watching at any given point, and depending on how long the live is, generally at the end of it, there's maybe like 200 to 300 people who have already seen it by the time it finishes, and then obviously people will watch it on catch up. But this live here, we've only been going for an hour and a half, and at the moment there are 27 people watching, although it's quite similar actually to my regular streams. It's fluctuated between 20 and 40, but the amount of people different viewers who have come is about 800 now. So that's a lot more than normal. In fact, it's just gone over 800. So it seems to be going well. Right, okay. Have we got any more questions? So Mario says, I agree. I'm just trying to see how the astrological argument may come across as strong as possible. Right, I get what you mean. Etrusca, hopefully I'm not saying that too wrong, says anti-natalism in Brazil when? You know, there are a few countries that I've got on my list who I want to do really soon, and they are Turkey, France, and Brazil. So it's interesting that Turkey and Brazil have been asked about in this live. So Brazil, I definitely want to do Brazil. I've been saving up links of things I've seen about anti-natalism in Brazil, and I have a person in mind about who I want to get on. Again, Etrusca, if you are Brazilian if you're Brazilian or very knowledgeable about Brazil and you know stuff about anti-natalism in Brazil, again, current stuff, historical stuff, specific individuals, projects that have happened, anything, how does it interact with the culture, all of this sort of stuff, please send me an email and let me know. And yeah, because that's an episode I'd like to do soon. It's just the thing is the more I do anti-natalism around the world videos, the more and more preparation I've liked to do for them. Because, for example, my very early ones the first ever one was in South Africa, and that wasn't even planned as an anti-natalism around the world. It was just me having a conversation with Benedictines the Vegan, or he's now called Benedictines the Truth. And that wasn't an anti-natalism around the world episode. But when I started the series, because I did that one, and then I had a conversation with Fatma in Algeria, and I was like, well, I've just interviewed 2 people in different countries. Why don't I just carry this on and make this a series? So that's how it started as a series. And then I started actually trying to find people in specific countries. So that's how it started. And I retroactively went back and included them in the series. And for those 2 episodes, I did hardly any research. One, because they weren't technically anti-natalism around the world episodes, but as time has gone on, I've done more and more preparation for them and more research of my own, because I want to get as much information in there as possible about these countries, to the point where the Polish one, the English one, and there was another one which is slipping my mind now, but they took like a lot of time to get the research together and stuff. So sometimes I sort of fall behind on things, but yes, Brazil, France, Turkey are the 3 countries that I really want to do next. Among others, I mean, there's all countries I want to do, but those are the sort of 3 big ones that I've got my eye on. Cool. So Bungbean says, should adults have the right to die if they choose to? Yes, I believe it's a fundamental right that people should have. Comwave, have you ever seen the movie Children of Men? You know what? I actually watched it the other day because I've heard people mention it for ages. Someone mentioned it the other day, and I somehow saw something pop up that was related to it, and I was like, you know what? I'll just watch it. So I watched it the other day, and weirdly enough, when I watched it, I was like, I swear I've seen this before. So I'm pretty sure I watched it when I was a kid with my dad. But I watched it again recently, and it was a really good film. I really enjoyed it. I think it was really well made. I loved a lot of the shots. for example, well, I won't spoil it for anyone, but there's a shot when the main character is coming out of a house and trying to get in some cars to escape from somewhere. And the way that scene is filmed, I really liked. Yeah. Anyway, I really like that. So yeah, I thought it was a great film. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Where are we? So Etruska says, sometimes I miss your lives, but I'm always around. No, much appreciated. Obviously, no one's obliged to be at the lives. Well, no one's obliged to watch my videos at all. But yeah, if you absolutely no worries for not being there live, and very welcome to watch them on catch up. Tailgate says, I will be getting active this summer promoting anti-natalism, and thank you, Lawrence, for your work. It does help me to build. Thank you so much, Tailgate, and great news. Tailgate, what sort of thing are you doing this summer, and whereabouts in the world are you? Maybe you said earlier in the chat, I can't remember, but where will you be doing your activism, and what sort of activism will you do? That's exciting to hear. Thanks for sharing that with us. All right. We've now gotten through all of the questions so far. So if anyone has any more questions, please put them in the chat. I'm now going to start going through my list of things that I had to talk about, because general people come into these lives a lot more than my normal ones. So I want to reiterate some of the basics of anti-natalism. So for anyone that's just joined, yesterday was International Anti-Natalist Day, which is a day where people celebrate anti-natalism or promote anti-natalism, talk about it, and also anti-natalists who are propagating this idea. Now, what is anti-natalism that people have heard? People have probably heard the slogan of it's immoral to procreate, or it's wrong to have kids, something like that. Anti-natalism generally is the view that coming into existence is a harm, and as a result, it's unethical to bring new sentient beings into existence, because that is imposing harm on them. Now, someone may think that's a completely fringe, weird belief. I've never heard anyone who's held that. There are quite... The belief has been around for like thousands of years, and there have been pretty prominent people who have held it. So some of the most famous people who have held it, well, it depends where you are as to whether they're famous or not, but people sort of dispute as to whether Arthur Schopenhauer was anti-natalist or not. But apart from his metaphysics, and there was slight differences in his sort of rationale, but like you can basically call him an anti-natalist. He thought that life was full of harm, characterized by harm, and it is the more rational and ethical thing not to bring people into that. So Arthur Schopenhauer is obviously very famous. Probably the most famous modern day proponent of anti-natalism is David Benatar. So if you're going to read one book on anti-natalism, definitely read his book, Better Never to Have Been. You can find it easily on Amazon or elsewhere. Another famous person who maybe isn't famous in the West, but is famous in the Arabic-speaking world, is Al-Mari. Now, Al-Mari lived about 1,000 years ago in what is now Syria. And he was a poet, an intellectual, a philosopher. And just remember, he was 1,000 years ago. And he was both vegan and anti-natalist, and quite strong in both of those beliefs. And I've actually just seen that Mario has made a donation. I've also just seen the positive pessimists message, which I'm not going to read out. But Mario's just made a donation. Thank you so much, Mario, for the support. And also thank you for your questions that you were asking before, and the engagement. It's really appreciated. And yeah, just thank you for the support. Like I said, it's going to really help with things like getting that, new microphone and things like this. I think another donation has just come through. another donation has just come through as well. Thank you so much to Mario for the super chat, absolute legend, and thank you for joining today. And then we've just had another donation come through from Syndicate. Apologies, actually, your name didn't come up. So sorry for revealing your name. So they ask, would you recommend talking or confronting your parents about anti-natalism? So confronting, no, I don't think that is I don't think that's the best approach. Obviously, confronting for different people means different things, but talking to them, look, I think when it comes to very divisive ethical issues, especially ones that you've only recently changed on, talking to family members is probably not the wisest thing to always do. It really depends on your situation, though. Like, it will depend on your family, your general, like how you are as a person, all of this sort of stuff. But I think it's something you can slip into conversation with them. First of all, if it's just a personal belief you have and you don't want to put it out there publicly, there's no obligation for anyone to talk to their parents about it or anything. But I mean, the only time I would recommend someone to talk to them is if it's something they really want to get off their chest, and they think it can be done in a healthy way. If it's something that's really bothering you that you can't be open about it with your parents, if you're particularly close to them, and you feel like they could receive it in an okay way and it not burn any bridges, then in that circumstances, I probably would recommend someone because it solves an issue. It solves this sort of underlying maybe issue or resentment in an environment where it's probably not going to backfire. So I probably, that's the probably example where I would recommend it. But confronting, I don't think I would recommend confronting because that sort of implies a more sort of negative, confrontational vibe. So I wouldn't recommend that. I don't think that's the best way to come at it from. And I think, no, we do have some more. So wait, I was in the middle of talking about Almari. So a few questions have come in. I will get to those questions. So if anyone else has any more questions, please put them in the chat, and then I will get to them once I finish talking about Almari. So again, just to go back for anyone new who's come on. So anti-natalism is the view that bringing someone into existence is a harm, or coming into existence is a harm, and therefore creating new sentient beings is an unethical thing to do. Now, someone who held this view a very long time ago, around 1,000 years ago, was Almari, who lived in what is now Syria. Now, Almari, he was vegan and anti-natalist and quite strong in both those beliefs at the time, which is very impressive around 1,000 years ago. He was a complete maverick of his time. But it was weird. He wasn't a maverick that was shunned or anything like that, or seen as a weirdo. He was actually quite well respected in his day. And he's actually very well respected now as well. He's seen as one of the most well-respected classical Arabic poets. Even today, he's taught in schools and stuff like that. Now, Almari was a guy who liked to share his ideas. He went to Baghdad, which was an intellectual hub at the time, and he spoke about all sorts of philosophical viewpoints there and discussed all sorts of things, and discussed anti-natalism there as far as I can tell. But he was blind as well. He was blind from a very young age. And he was vegan from, I think, probably around maybe he was like 40 or something when he became vegan. I'm not entirely sure. He lived till quite old. I think he lived till he was like in his 80s or something. And I think he was around 40 when he became vegan. And some people say, well, do you know if he actually, really was vegan, or he really was anti-natalist? Now, I'll just give you two. There's many things that you can point to, but I'll just give you two, because a lot of the poems that he wrote were about anti-natalism or veganism, or had flavors of those things in. But just two examples to sort of go to show like how dedicated he was to these two beliefs. So it was very common to wear like leather sandals around that time, but and they were obviously going to be much more comfortable than wooden shoes, because walking on wood is really hard and uncomfortable. But Almari wore wooden shoes because he was against the use of animal skins. He would also, he also has a poem called "I No Longer Steal from Nature," which goes into all sorts of things about veganism, about not taking milk, not taking eggs, even not taking honey, not wearing animals' skins, all this sort of stuff. So yeah, like he was very dedicated to veganism and the support of animals, but he was also very anti-natalist as well. So he has a whole range of things in his poems, but one, maybe the most famous example of his anti-natalism was on his grave. And on his grave, you can still his grave still exists today. You can still go to it today in a town or city in Syria, although I'm not sure how safe it is to travel there. But on his grave, he has a message there that says, "This is my father's crime. This is the crime my father did to me, and that I do to none." Essentially meaning his father imposed death on him by creating him, and he didn't have any children, and so he because he didn't want to impose this crime on anyone else. So pretty cool. 1,000 years ago in what is now Syria. So he's a top legend. So let's get to the questions. Sorry, because a few more questions have come in. So Kani asks, what's the most convincing argument you've ever heard for natalism? So I don't think I've ever heard a good argument for natalism in terms of in like a philanthropic natalist argument, in terms of like somehow it would benefit the being to bring them into existence. I've never heard a convincing argument like that. The arguments that I've heard that I think would get the closest to making natalism look attractive are more consequentialist ones, where they essentially say it may be unethical to create new sentient beings in principle, but we live in a world where if we refrain from creating at least certain other sentient beings, it would cause issues downstream from that are so large that we can't ignore, and perhaps we have to just, as a necessary evil, create more sentient beings. I think those are the arguments that have probably got the closest. And those sorts of arguments, like they've had more and less attraction to me over time. Yeah, I would. They haven't changed my opinion on anti-natalism. I'm still anti-natalist, but I would say those are the ones that have probably been the strongest. And Tailgate has put in the chat. So this goes back to a point. Anyone who's just joined, Tailgate said that they're going to do some anti-natalist activism sometime this summer, and I asked where and what sort of activism. And Tailgate says I had a banner made, and we'll be recording each interaction and uploading on YouTube. That is amazing, Tailgate. What can you share with us? Like, what sort of banner? Where do you expect to hang it? Is this like over a table and talking with people that way? Yeah, I look forward to seeing those videos over the course of the summer. I haven't taken any steps to do it yet, but I had similar ideas as well to do some of those in London. Good initiative. And I think whilst that has been, I think, pretty much done to death with veganism, anti-natalism really doesn't have much content out there, like quality content out there. Like there's not much content on anti-natalism in general, and out of the content that is produced, a lot of it is not that high quality. So yeah, more power to you, Tailgate. Thanks so much for letting us know about that. Let's see. So Positive Pessimist has a question. Now I'm going to read this one super slowly because I don't know if it's going to try and catch me out. So have you read the 12th century Jewish philosopher Maimonides? I think he was anti-natalist, but the thing with Maimonides, nuts, haha, got him. I don't want to say it all out in one go because I know it's going to be something dodgy, but I can't. Maybe I'm being dumb, but I can't figure out what that's going to say. But nice luck next time, John. So Merchant's Humanist Right. What was the year that he died? I'm assuming you mean Al-Mari. I can just Google that now if you want, but it was around 1,000 years ago. So Al-Mari died in the year 1057. So that's when he died. Tailgate Activism says, I have a table that the banner will connect to and have invested in quality audio equipment. Nice, Tailgate Activism. That's cool to hear. Why is that doing that? Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, so quality content on the way. Mikey asks, how many abortions is too many? And I only have oh right, I'm not sure if that is a serious question. Cool. Okay, I think those are all the questions for now. We've been going for about 2 hours, and we're actually just about to hit 1,000 views. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go over a few more things. If anyone has any questions, please ask them, and then we'll close off. So again, for anyone who's just joined, yesterday was International Anti-Natalist Day, the 9th of April. Anti-natalism is the view that coming into existence is a harm, and as a result, we shouldn't be creating new sentient beings. The most common understanding of that is don't have children, it's wrong to have children, or it's wrong to procreate. You may have seen people like Stop Having Kids. It has, been around on social media. So they've been getting some media attention. They're maybe the most well-known group as it is at the moment. Some other famous people who have spoken about this, well, the most well-known contemporary proponent is David Benatar. If you're looking for a book, then go read his book, Better Never to Have Been. And Comwave has replied, I think men shouldn't donate sperm. Yes, I agree with you, Comwave. So the thing that we were talking about before has no basis in reality. Like the discussion that you're referring to has no basis in reality. Like it was there were so many caveats on it, and to get to a point where you know that those caveats are in place is so complex a calculation that you'd never be able to know. So it was discussed as like a funny hypothetical of where consequentialist ethics can get you, but it has no basis in reality. So I agree with you. I don't think anyone should be donating to sperm banks. Right, and we are edging closer and closer to 1,000 views. So, okay, so Alex has just asked the question: what do you think about World War III and human extinction to save future generations? So the bit about World War Three, I'm not sure about World War Three. I don't know if it's something that will happen. I don't know if it's something that has already started to happen. It was interesting. I was watching a clip of Yuval Noah Harari, and he was saying that people may look back on us now and think, how did they not realize that they were already in World War Three or on the path to World War Three? You know, someone could look back at maybe what happened between Russia and Ukraine, or what's happening in Israel, Gaza now. And people will look back and say that was so clearly the starting point for what led to World War Three. But if that has been set in motion, we don't realize it yet because it hasn't fully materialized yet. So yeah, I think World War Three, it may never happen. It may have already started. Who really knows? But the world definitely seems in a precarious place at the moment. And then you ask about human extinction, saving future generations. I don't think human extinction will save future generations. I think it will spare future generations. But yeah, that I mean, I'm not. Maybe I'm missing a part of your question. But yeah, I agree. I think if we don't bring new beings into existence, we've spared them the harms that they would have endured. Positive Pessimist says, turns out my old uni had stored anti-natalist writings from the 80s, but sadly, oh, God's sake. And we've just hit 1,000. We've just hit 1,000 views. There's 29 people watching at the moment. We're going to round off now, so if you're watching at the moment, please put in the chat, say hello, just so I know who's watching at the moment before we say goodbye. But just before we round off, I want to say again, yesterday was International Anti-Natalist Day. I've got a few quick announcements I'm going to make before we finish. So the first thing to say is definitely, if you're in Europe and you can get to them, definitely support Nimrod in his European Anti-Natalist tour. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then please go to my channel and go to the videos and scroll down to, it's maybe like 5 or 6 down, and it's about a European Anti-Natalist tour. It has that in the title. Nimrod is going around to 33 cities in 45 days and doing, anti-natalist outreach there with different people, and he's in loads of different countries. So go to that video. The list is in there. You can also go to don'tprocreate.org. That's his website. It has all the information on there as well. If you go on there, welcome to the chat, Yoda. What a legend. You can go on there and get all the information. If you're in Europe and can reach any of those locations on that date, please go join him. I posted on my community tab earlier today. I will be joining him in Vienna on Saturday and Sunday. Let me just get the dates. It is Saturday and Sunday, the 4th and 5th of June. So, yes, so if you're near Vienna or can get to Vienna or in Vienna, then come and join us on May the 4th and 5th or one of those dates. We'll be doing some anti-natalist outreach together. And on the evening of the Saturday, May the 4th, May the 4th, we will also be having an anti-natalist meetup social in the evening over dinner at Vevi, which is a vegan restaurant in Austria, where the food looks amazing. So please, if you're looking to meet other anti-natalists or do some activism or both, please come and join us in Vienna, and it'll be amazing. We've already got a few people confirmed, so I'm looking forward to that. Right, so who's in the chat? Thanks for coming. New York City, Positive Pessimist, Louis, Syndicate, Yoda, My Transhumanist Rights, Alex. Thanks everyone for coming. Oh, Alex has a last question. What do you think about the book, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, and Ligotti's view on nature's fault to give rise to human consciousness? You know what? Embarrassingly enough, I haven't actually read Ligotti's book yet. I need to get around to it. I did watch the review that Carol Wainwright did on Thomas Ligotti's book, but I haven't actually read the book itself yet. So I can only apologize. But yeah, it's one on my list, and I'm going to get around to it. But thank you for the question, and sorry I couldn't give you apologies I couldn't give you a proper answer. Just come into the chat now is Religion of Peace. Welcome, Religion of Peace. We are actually just ending. And Comwave as well, thanks so much for being here. And thank you everyone for being here and coming to the stream, my first vertical one, and supporting. And I will see everyone in the next one. Oh, and thank you as well so much for all the people that donated and supported. It's really appreciated, and it's only going to go to improving the channel. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.